My name is Dr. Sarah Schewitz, and I'm a licensed psychologist.
What is your mission of Couples Learn?
Yeah, so I founded Couples Learn, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and our mission is to help folks break generational trauma patterns by healing attachment wounds, whether that's individually or as a couple.
Yeah, when I was doing my research, I saw big T trauma and little t trauma. What is that?
Yeah, so there's the big T trauma, which is stuff that you kind of think of traditionally as trauma, being assaulted or getting in a bad car accident or being part of a natural disaster. Um, those are things that everyone kind of understands are traumatic. And then there's little T traumas, which a lot of us don't actually know are traumas. These are things like being repeatedly exposed to your parents fighting growing up, or a divorce, depending on how it was handled, or being bullied as a child, experiencing racism throughout your life. These are all little T traumas. They're little relational traumas, what we call attachment trauma, that over time, they're like little paper cuts that over time create a huge gaping wound. And where you mostly see the impact of little T trauma is in how people function in relationships.
Speaking of relationships, how does trauma impact relationships?
Well, those of us who experienced a lot of little T trauma growing up usually have an insecure attachment style. So that means either you're anxiously attached or avoidant attachment, or you're a combination of the two and you have an anxious avoidant attachment. And the way that shows up in relationship is that we often get triggered in bigger ways than we would if we didn't have that attachment trauma. For example, let's say your partner doesn't want to hang out with you on a certain day. For somebody with a secure attachment who hasn't experienced a lot of attachment trauma growing up, they might be like, okay, no problem. You don't want to hang out today. For someone with an anxious attachment style who has experienced abandonment growing up, for example, this might feel like the relationship's going to end. I've done something wrong. They might start questioning everything about the relationship just because their partner doesn't want to hang out on a certain day. So, like little things that maybe wouldn't be as big of a deal feel like a really big deal to someone who has experienced attachment trauma and does have an insecure attachment style.
And if people are thinking of therapy, what are with someone struggling, what should they do either in individual therapy or couples therapy?
Well, there's lots of ways to work with this. And, kind of deciding between whether it's better to do the work individually or in a relationship. Obviously, if you're not in a relationship, that's a no-brainer. You do individual therapy. Um, but if you're in a relationship, I think there's often benefit to doing both individual and couples therapy because some of these things can be and should be healed individually. It's kind of about you working with your inner child and reparenting yourself and learning how to soothe your nervous system so that you can have a healthy internal kind of sense of self and safety. So that's the individual work. And then the couples work is learning how to co-regulate with your partner, how to recognize when you're in these triggered states or dysregulated nervous system states, and how to help your partner kind of come back into their adult self, how to be the loving parent in that moment of dysregulation to their inner child and connect with them in a safe way. So, some kind of differentiating factors of whether to do that individually or in a couple. If you feel like you have a safe partner who is committed to doing the work with you, um, and you've already done some individual work around this, then it might be a good idea to do couples work. But if you feel like you haven't done any individual work, you don't have any coping strategies or self-soothing strategies, and maybe you don't have a safe partner who's willing to dive into that work with you, then individual work would definitely be the way to go.
How do you treat attachment trauma, and why is it so important to talk about it?
Yeah. Well, it's important to talk about it because I feel like not I feel like the research shows our relationship really determines the health of our relationship, really determines the health of a lot of things in our life. How successful we are, how happy we are, how healthy we are. Like folks who are consistently exposed to negative relationships or like toxic relationship patterns actually have worse physical health. So, how healthy your relationship is defines almost every area of your life. It defines how healthy your kids are going to be. So there's a lot that goes into it. So why work on this stuff is because if you want to have healthy relationships, you've got to work through your attachment trauma, and the state of your relationship defines so many different parts of your life, or influences so many different parts of your life. And then how to work on it, there's a lot of different approaches. What you want to do is a bottom up approach. So that means an approach that takes your body into consideration and isn't just mind based. So you can't really think your way out of attachment trauma, and you can't really logic your way out of a dysregulated nervous system. This is why talk therapy often isn't effective for people. Even though they might gain insight, they aren't seeing changes in the patterns in their relationships. Like they may understand why they're doing something, but they can't necessarily stop doing it. Or they may understand why they're attracted to unhealthy partners over and over again, and yet they can't change who they're attracted to. So this is a sign that you need a more bottom-up approach instead of a top-down approach. Top-down is thinking first and then maybe connecting with your body, whereas bottom-up is connecting with your body and then the thoughts change as a result. So some approaches that integrate that would be EMDR, which is the type of therapy I'm trained in. I'm specifically trained in attachment-focused EMDR, which is a really helpful modality for changing your attachment style and healing attachment trauma and changing how your relationships are. Other approaches are somatic therapy, somatic experiencing therapy, polyvagal therapy, basically any type of therapy that takes your body and your nervous system into account and teaches you how to check in with it and soothe it as needed. Internal family systems is another one that can be really helpful for connecting with your inner child and different parts of you and helping heal that.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
So I've done a lot of those therapies myself. I certainly had my fair share of attachment trauma, and that was impacting my relationships significantly for many years. And I did attachment focused EMDR as a client. That's what prompted me to get trained in it as a therapist. And that really, really transformed how I feel in relationship, how I show up in relationship, and just the health of my relationships in a big way. Another thing that I'm really diving into now is somatic therapy. And I have a great somatic therapist who I'm working with. And just learning about the stuff I was telling you, like your nervous system and how it functions, learning how to regulate my nervous system on a regular basis so that I don't get overwhelmed or dysregulated. So I do a lot on a regular basis. I think you got to practice what you preach.
Yeah.
And often we go into the type of thing that we have overcome, right? So like if I've done this attachment trauma work, I've realized how transformational it is. And that's a big part of why I'm so passionate about teaching it to others.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
I would say that your body is doing exactly what it thinks it needs to do to help you survive. And whatever symptoms you're experiencing or challenges you're experiencing, they are probably a result of coping strategies and defense mechanisms that you learned in childhood, and they made so much sense back then. And maybe they don't make as much sense now as an adult, and that's okay. You can learn how to change that with the right therapist and the right help. And there's free resources out there too, as well.
How can people reach out to you and learn more?
To reach out to me, I'm on Instagram at Couples Learn. My website is coupleslearn.com, and those are two ways to kind of see a little bit more about what I do and how I do it. And if you want to work together, the next step would be to book a free 30-minute consultation with me via my website.